The meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee for Tuesday, January 16th, 2018 is called to order. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Anderson, Mr. David.
Present.
Mr. Jessic, Mr. Lyman.
Present.
Mr. LaSalle.
Here.
Mr. McEnroth.
Here.
Mr. Mahoney, Mr. Mitchell.
Here.
Item two, approval of the minutes of December 19th, 2017. Does anybody have any corrections or changes to those meeting minutes? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Agenda analysis item number 3. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda they'd like to make? None. Citizen comments, item number 4. We have one citizen comment. Lisa Novak, please come forward.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm out of my way. Folks, I am here to ask the Transportation Advisory Committee to review the pedestrian safety improvements along Holcomb Boulevard. Currently, there are none. At this time, the boulevard is a 2-lane stretch with a speed limit of 40 miles per hour with no traffic, calming, or pedestrian safety measures. Studies show a pedestrian struck at 40 miles an hour has an 85% chance of dying. The reaction and stopping distance at 40 miles per hour is 266 feet, about 16 car lengths. The pedestrian dilemma is that it's difficult to know when approaching motorists are going to honor the pedestrian right-of-way, which there currently isn't on Holcomb. It's difficult for me to imagine a child being able to estimate a safe crossing. Simply waiting for a break in traffic is often unreasonable and could leave a person standing for a long time. Add this to the mix someone with poor eyesight, someone trying to take care of a bunch of children while crossing the streets, someone who walks slowly or uses a wheelchair and will thus take more time getting across. Waiting for a break in traffic is not a solution. In regards to Holcomb Boulevard, the park and schools are on the north side of the neighborhood, while the mailboxes and several residential developments are on the south side. Just a few short sidewalks exist on the south side of Holcomb, forcing pedestrians and cyclists to use the bike lane, which has varying widths. I'd like to go out there and measure 3 feet at the most in some places. And there are no crosswalks at the intersections with residential streets, with several blind turns along the route. If the pedestrian is not walking in the right place and gets hit, then the driver will be able to argue in court that the pedestrian violated the law by jaywalking. In collisions with vehicles, pedestrians are always the losers. Walking is a right and driving is a privilege. With the new Park Place residential developments, both planned and in process, we are adding even more vehicle volume. Is our aim to be a city of car-centric residential developments where people are trapped in their neighborhoods, discouraging community and walkability? We know that community and personal health are improved through walking. The folks who actually put in the miles on foot are forced to dodge cars, contending with dangerous intersections and roadways every day. These are the folks that suffer. I respectfully ask the committee to expedite the implementation of pedestrian safety measures. Thank you.
Do we have? Yeah. Please, Lisa? Mm-hmm. I think we have a question.
So what specific pedestrian safety measures are you asking for?
I would like to see at the very minimum crosswalks, especially at the intersection of Hunter and Holcomb. Cars are lined up on the northwest side with folks dropping off their children because it's no longer safe to safely cross Holcomb. And because of the configuration going towards Bradley Road, there's a hill as you approach Hunter. if someone is in, either on the sidewalk, on the north side, or on the south side bike lane, they can't be seen until their vehicle is practically on top of them. It happens to me almost every morning.
Crosswalk at Hunter and
Holcomb, at the minimum. Also Hunter and Swan, I see kids out there every morning trying to cross. And that's another intersection.
Holcomb and Swan.
Yeah, Holcomb and Swan. And of course, something up near Holcomb Elementary School. And I've timed it, if I'm on the south side of Holcomb, and there's a church heading towards my house, which is near the intersection of Hunter and Holcomb. There's a strip of grass that I'm able to walk on. But at some point, I'm forced to go into the bike lane, which is very narrow. And because of that hill, drivers do not see me. And I'm already in the bike lane, and I have to run to make it. I can't imagine a child or someone trying to reach their mailbox. Very dangerous situation. So, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Lisa, I'd like you to refer to, in the agenda,
Lisa, do you have what you read from? A copy?
item 5.
Thank you.
Item 5 on the agenda, when you get home. There's a very good article in there on crosswalk information.
I saw that, and, okay.
Okay,
I'll
it's
stick around.
really good information.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question for John about this. Is Holcomb still a county road, or do we have jurisdiction?
It's City Road. City Road?
Would it be reasonable to have a look-see at Hunter or Swan for maybe a all-way stop like Holcomb and on those side streets?
Well, we can look at it.
Just as a thought.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that the warrants would justify that.
Well, I don't either, but we won't know if we don't look.
Would we want to start off with a pedestrian count?
Yeah, I don't know that we would need to go to that effort. We have, on the TSP, Martin's gonna try and pull it up, there is a crossing there that's intended to go in there, more of a pedestrian activated flashing kind of crosswalk, which Martin's gonna
Similar to
talk a
what
little
we
bit
have
about
at the library?
now. Yeah, similar to what we have at the library. Planned for along Holcomb. I think there's actually 2 along Holcomb. But obviously just striping them adds some concern for me. There is good sight distance along a lot of that stretch down near Swan and Hunter. But yeah, we've got, there's the whole plan for that area up there we implemented basically half of it when we took it over from the county, which put sidewalks and street lighting up most of Holcomb. But I don't remember if there was other recommendations for striped crosswalks, and so I'd have to look. But I wouldn't want to suggest we're going to go do pedestrian counts right now.
Would it be helpful
Nor would I
if the
suggest we
neighborhood
put in stop signs.
association brought forward some recommendations of exactly where those should be placed? Because I know that the transportation system plan shows a very dangerous place for a crosswalk, right at the Holcomb curves up there by the school. It would be very, very impractical. The neighborhood association would have a better idea for strong recommendations of where those should be placed.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
Okay.
I know that I drop off my kids at Holcomb in the morning, and then I take Holcomb down to Redland and then up to 213 to go back to work. And it's crazy. I mean, people are driving way past the speed limit, and I didn't see as many pedestrians, but people are moving there pretty, over sometimes 50 miles an hour. So I don't know even if this can be deferred to a police for enforcement, something like that, to kind of.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons Sedgwick doesn't see any pedestrians is because people are too frightened to walk on them.
Would it be helpful for us to have a subgroup to do some looking, or to do some, put a recommendation for the Transportation Advisory Committee to put forward?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if they have already a plan, I guess they have indicated improvements, safety improvements to be made. It's just, I don't know, how far along are they in their CIP program to implement?
We can definitely pull information specific from the TSP. In fact, I think this all was presented in the presentation I gave you 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
So we listed the projects that were in the TSP, and we shared the speed along Holcomb based on the history of data that we have. But we can look at that again and show you what we have in the TSP, and what I didn't provide in that last report was the Holcomb Boulevard plan. We can pull that as well and share that with you. So,
I mean, this was just my observation when I'm commuting in the morning there. That's what I experienced.
yeah.
And I
We've
just
heard
wanted
that a fair amount.
to point out to Ms. Novak that crosswalks can give a pedestrian a false sense of security, and federal studies show that mid-walk crossings are really very dangerous. Because they're marked and the pedestrian thinks I'm covered, but it's not a barrier. And with those speeds coming down there, it could be a very dangerous situation. So sometimes the expectation that the pedestrian needs to run across is actually safer than I can walk at my leisure in a crosswalk. So that's my past history that I've gleaned.
From just a review, what we have on the GIS related to crosswalking, and so crosswalk standard or improvements and safe walking routes. All of Holcomb is earmarked for sidewalk improvements, which also leads to a lot of the issues we have with trying to get safe crosswalk locations, because you've got segments of sidewalk that are just missing. And it's not a very easy solution, because there's portions of it just from looking at where we have pavement and right-of-way line and where the sidewalk would go, where we don't have right-of-way. So we'd have to acquire the right-of-way to install said sidewalk. There are 4 locations within the TSP that are defined for sidewalk improvements. I haven't drilled down, or not sidewalk improvements, crosswalk improvements. I haven't drilled down into it to find out what each of the unique improvement recommendations are, because I'd have to open up the full plan to do that. But they call for them at Winston, Oak Tree Terrace, Swan, and Front Avenue. So those are the 4 defined locations where they're calling for some sort of crosswalk improvement. What they're calling for, I have to drill into the document and give you a better idea.
And several years ago, John Anderson and I talked to the neighbors on the north side of Holcomb, east of the elementary school. And we got some positive feedback from the property owners that they might even be interested in donating the right-of-way. However, the cost of stormwater put the project out of reach.
Yeah, we paid, remember, we hired Wallace a few years back to do a estimate, kind of conceptual plan for that same area that you're talking about there between the school driveway and really one of the first developments that actually built sidewalks up there. Yeah, it was expensive. We've pursued grants to try and get that. So, yeah, I understand. I understand the desire, and it's definitely an identified need. It's really just trying to find a way to get that all to come together, and we can build segments of it. At the time, it was that neighborhood off of Oak Tree Terrace that drops down into the newer neighborhood. There's that pathway that comes out. There's a lot of people that wanted a crosswalk right there, which isn't a great place for a crosswalk. Because again, people speed around that corner, and I do wouldn't doubt it if they're exceeding the speed limit, so.
One reason I brought up maybe the advice of the neighborhood association is that Martin mentioned the proposed crosswalk at Oak Tree Terrace. Well, I live on Oak Tree Terrace, and sometimes when I drive out of there with my car, I'm taking my life in my hands because people come over that hill so fast. So that would have to be moved one direction or the other. But anyway, I think that we'll probably follow up on this one way or another. We have a meeting, the neighborhood has a meeting on Thursday, we'll address it.
Yeah, it's actually, that's intersection improvements there. It's not just crosswalk. So you'd probably be looking at some sort of controlled intersection that would then facilitate a crosswalk. So, but that's just from what I can see from just doing a very cursory GIS overview.
Okay.
But you've got bigger issues at that location. There's another location we don't have right away, and you need sidewalk fronting on Holcomb. Now, some of the developments that are coming in would be conditioned for the frontage along Holcomb, with potentially installing, sidewalk through there. I don't do land use. John's the land use guy, but I would imagine that would be a condition. And for some of those, they probably may have some intersection improvements that they'd have to calculate for some of these defined intersections that we know need improvements. So that could be one of them.
Well, yeah, typically if you're doing large development, this will be flagged.
Yeah.
So those projects will have to contribute or in some instances.
They'd have to contribute towards the cost of them being constructed in the future through SDCs, or they could be conditioned within their development on helping implement some of them, depending on how close they are to it.
The problem is for much of Holcomb, it's on the either already developed side that doesn't have sidewalks, or they're long lots that aren't gonna develop into, anything beyond what they already are. So there is that. It's kind of like the piece that we built on the west side of Holcomb, rather than Holcomb runs kind of east-west, so maybe it's on the north side where the sidewalk is. That took a pretty concerted effort and a grant.
Okay, item 5, new business discussion items. 5A, introduction of new TAC members. I'd like to say that John Anderson, I think I just...
Bob, there was one more comment card.
There was 2 comments. We only had.
This is for the trail meeting.
Okay.
Is it for the trail?
It relates directly to...
We do it with the trail.
That's fine,
Thing.
that's coming up, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
John Anderson, who I think I just saw walk through there, he may join us in a minute, has been reappointed to an at-large position for the term of January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2020. And a new appointment, Mike Mitchell, glad to see you with us. He's an at-large position for the term of January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2020. Glad to be here. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
We get things done on this one, so.
Good deal.
Okay, item 5B, McLaughlin Kanema Trail presentation by Kelly Reed.
Thank you, Chair LaSalle. While Lisa is, thank you, setting up the PowerPoint, just want to thank you for having me again and preface the presentation with, I've been before you before to talk about this project. And after that, the project was presented to the Planning Commission as a legislative amendment to be officially adopted. That was in November. And so there was a really healthy discussion at the Planning Commission meeting about the plan. We heard actually a lot of input from the public who we had not heard from throughout the process. And so because of that, the Planning Commission continued that item, put it on hold and said, why don't you go back and digest this new information that we've heard. go back to the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee and actually get a formal motion from those groups. So we had talked about that we had presented to you, and we had heard feedback from you, but there was no official or formal motion. So if you're willing tonight, then it would be great to get a formal motion from this group, so that when we go back to Planning Commission in February, we can report on that. So I might skip through some of this because I know you've seen it before, and John was a little bit nervous about the number of slides in my presentation, so I'm going to try and go quickly.
Thanks, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Might I suggest you just go to the part where, not what wasn't approved, but what the group finally approved?
Sure, yeah. I'll breeze through the beginning and then go to what's changed. So, of course, as you know, the project is a pedestrian improvement, pedestrian and bike access improvement, but also kind of a parks collaboration that connects up some of the really nice city amenities that we have or will have in the area. The TSP included several projects that really, when put together, make up the McLaughlin to Conema Trail. Those are family-friendly routes along with shared-use paths. So this plan is really just a refinement of what's already in our transportation system plan. Trails Master Plan anticipated this trail as well. Got some existing conditions images. We've got a lot of challenges here, as you can see, but then a lot of opportunities as well, and some really nice environments, for people to spend time in, such as Old Conema Park and the Historic District. So we did a lot of community engagement for this project. This is a list of all of our meetings. As you can see, we did visit the Transportation Advisory Committee back in October. And we had a community advisory group that Mr. Lyman served on. That group met 4 times and developed these recommendations. This is where I'm skipping through a lot of stuff. So we had a Greenway for a day. We opened up the trail temporarily for folks and got a lot of really great feedback. We heard people come in and say, I have never been to this park and I've lived in Oregon City for more than 30 years, and this is so great, and I'm really glad that you guys are doing this. And then we also got some feedback on what people's least favorite parts of the trail were, and that was kind of walking along the street next to traffic, kind of what Lisa was referring to earlier. So we looked at a variety of alignment alternatives to kind of connect A and B, and there were pros and cons to each of these alignments. The group really liked aspects of all 3, but ultimately wanted to kind of just choose one to really put their recommendation behind and kind of get momentum going behind that. So there's alignment A, using the boardwalk along McLaughlin. Alignment B, which follows mostly what's shown in the TSP now, goes through Old Conema Park. And then alignment C that utilizes High Street to South End Road to 5th Avenue. And so we had a evaluation criteria to evaluate each of these trails. We kind of used a consumer report style little ranking system, if you will, where we looked at the quality of the experience, safety, property impacts, environmental impacts, and then we did consider cost, but didn't score it. So you'll see estimated costs in there, but it wasn't necessarily taken into account for the overall evaluation or the numerical ranking. So alignment B ended up being the highest scoring according to our evaluation criteria, and so that morphed into the recommendation. So the final recommendation is slightly different from what alignment B originally was. So we kind of created a hybrid, if you will. So the recommendation is also to start with an interim route and then potentially have a slightly different permanent route in the future when funds are available. So in the interim, we would come off of the promenade at 2nd Street, go along High Street where we have an existing sidewalk, and then turn on South 2nd. Now you could cross South 2nd at the four-way stop at High Street, or you could walk down past the Still House and cross at 99. And then you're walking along McLaughlin in front of the PG substation into Old Kanema Park and then into the Kanema neighborhood, utilizing the most direct route, which is 3rd Avenue to Ganong to 4th Avenue, which leads you into Kanema Children's Park. Of course, with the existing conditions along this route, we know it can't be signed or used as a trail quite yet. We need to improve safety along McLaughlin. We would need to install traffic calming and new signage within Kanema. There are no sidewalks in the neighborhood, and there won't be because of the historic district and character of that neighborhood. We'll be looking at shared streets, which I'll talk about, and then utilizing the existing trail in Old Kanema Park. So the promenade connection to High Street via 2nd currently looks like this. There is a section of just grass, which for ADA purposes would be nice to get a connection there. So we're talking with, of course, Phil Lewis, Parks and Rec, to talk about how we can connect that. On McLaughlin, we'd like to see some sort of separation between people walking and people driving, and so we have a buffer shown. What that buffer is still to be determined, and no matter what we do, it's going to require a design exception with ODOT, and so we've been working closely with ODOT on that, and so with this plan we weren't able to really nail down any specific treatment here, but that would be a next step after this plan is adopted.
Is ODOT supportive of the idea of working this out?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we have a letter of support from ODOT, and their active transportation staff is working with us and trying to find the best possible solutions, but they have a lot of bureaucracy, of course, that we have to go through, as you're familiar, I'm sure. Within Kanema, we've been looking at a reduced speed limit to 20 miles per hour, on-street markings that look similar to that black and white little symbol that you see on the right side of your screen. Some visual narrowing using just paint, some wayfinding signage, and then those are kind of the priorities, but the group also talked about stop signs and speed humps. Those probably wouldn't be installed right away, but we would monitor how the other treatments are performing essentially, and if it's really doing the job, and if stop signs and speed humps are still needed to really make it safe, then I think we would consider that after a while. The permanent trail alignment is just slightly different from the interim trail alignment, and this actually has us connecting the promenade up through the VFW parking lot and then improving that VFW driveway down to Tumwater Drive. And then crossing South 2nd either at Tumwater or at 99. And we have kind of a few options that we're carrying forward. This is what is different from what you may have seen before. We heard from some property owners within this area that they were concerned that original trail kind of cut right through here with the acknowledgement that that would be worked out through a development process. But the feedback we got was, it's bisecting those properties and that's uncomfortable for folks. And so maybe we should consider other options or maybe show it differently on the plans so that no one's confused about where we're trying to actually put the trail. So we've got one option that would come down Tumwater and then come at the base of this property here, and then jog back up to PGE. We did think about going behind PGE, but it's actually not safe from a security perspective. There's a barbed wire fence, lots of places for people to hide. So PGE said, we're not okay with that, but we're okay with you going in front of the substation.
We can't see your marker on our screens.
No, you can't, sorry. Let me know if anything I'm saying is confusing without being able to see the pointer. Other options would come down Tumwater and then go back up to 99. And then alternatively, we could kind of keep the interim alignment, which just goes all along the frontage of 99, and we could really invest heavily in making it really nice and safe along that stretch. I think that there are challenges to all of these options, especially the one that kind of goes behind all of those properties. There's a lot of topography there that makes that challenging. And I think you'll hear from a community member too that there are property impacts to that potentially. So we don't want to, I think in the future when we get to a time when we can tackle this permanent trail beyond the interim trail, it's going to require some more work and a lot more outreach to these neighbors that it would affect. The business owners liked the option, or were okay with the option of going behind their businesses. And the reason that's still there is that there's some really strong desire from folks on the advisory committee that we keep people off of Highway 99 as much as possible because of the traffic safety. So that it would be a lot more comfortable to kind of go back behind all of that instead of walking next to all the cars driving on McLaughlin. We would be adding a safe crossing of South 2nd, widening the trail within Old Kenema Park. So that's the VFW driveway. The group would like to see some sort of improvement that would have a separated pedestrian path next to the driveway in some form. And so knowing that, we probably won't have the funding for this right away, that's why it's in the permanent trail alignment rather than the interim. And then along Tumwater, we would be kind of narrowing the driving space, expanding the path to 10 to 12 feet wide. And you still have enough room there for 2 travel lanes and 2 on-street parking lanes. And one thing I didn't mention, but that is really important because everybody seems to want this to happen yesterday, is this left turn from McLaughlin onto Tumwater. Cars kind of turning early instead of going up to the light. That will be closed. That is the recommendation of the group. It's also supported by ODOT, and we are working through the details with ODOT on that right now to figure out how we would close that turn. But that'll improve the safety for people coming down that driveway, walking on Tumwater. You won't have cars, coming in from 99 and speeding through to try and beat the light.
I never understood how that passed ODOT's evaluation in the first place.
Yeah. So on Tumwater itself, you would see fewer cars traveling on Tumwater because nobody would be able to make that turn. And it would just be really the VFW traffic, the museum traffic, and then the couple houses that get access off of Tumwater. So as far as crossing of South 2nd, this is a potential, it's just a concept. But our consultants wanted to kind of show what it could look like if we did do a crossing at Tumwater. This is not necessarily what is planned, but it's an option, and it's nice to be able to show people. So we'd have the trail coming here along the frontage of the museum, a nice crosswalk probably with the flashers, and a refuge island in the middle. And then the trail would continue. if the trail did continue along Tumwater, and we would expect some of those, that property there on the corner to redevelop eventually, then this could be what that looks like. Of course, that redevelopment timing is totally out of our hands, and so this is probably a very far future drawing. I'm going to skip through these. These are kind of for the Planning Commission to sort out. And then our TSP projects that we're amending through this plan include that shared use path project. So originally it was that black line, then you can see the 4 kind of different options in the dashed red line there. We would be amending a project for shared lane markings on Center Street to add that segment of High Street that we'd be using for the interim trail. We're adding that left turn closure onto Tumwater, adding the crossing of South 2nd, and then revising the family-friendly route to include all of the streets in Kenema. Even though all of the streets aren't part of the trail plan necessarily, they all lack pedestrian facilities, and we know that people walk throughout the neighborhood. There are bus stops that kids walk to, and so we said, why not just include all of the streets in Kenema for that family-friendly route. Trails projects, I'll skip through, and then we have a lot of next steps after this would be adopted, which I won't go into too much unless there are questions.
I had a question. When you were evaluating the alternatives, did you estimate a maintenance cost for these various options? So if most of it's along a street as a widened sidewalk, it's probably shared maintenance, maybe like sidewalks are in some cases with the city. If you have an independent trail in the back, then you're gonna have to be taking care of that yourself. I mean, you look at old Kenema Park, and you know, that needs a lot of work, so we can't keep up with what we have. Have we estimated what this is gonna add to maintenance?
I think that our cost estimates were just for the capital project.
Right, I think that before you get a complete green light on this, I mean, it seems to me we should estimate who's going to do the maintenance and what that's gonna look like. We maintain most of the promenade right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Parks.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of this, so.
What was the cost range on that preferred alternative?
I think it was 2 to 2.6, I wanna say. 2.1 to 2.6. We have a more detailed cost estimate that is in the appendix of the final report. So that's up on the project website, and I can make sure you get a link to that.
Have you been talking up with the Kenema Neighborhood Association?
Did I what?
Have you been discussing all this with the Kenema Neighborhood Association?
Yes. I have been to the Neighborhood Association a couple times during the process, and Kenema had a representative on the advisory group. And in addition to that, before we would be implementing any of the 20 miles per hour kind of speed limit changes, we have an outreach plan to make sure that everybody is aware in Kenema.
And then have you discussed parking with the VFW?
Yes. That's another thing we did after the Planning Commission meeting is Phil Lewis and I had a meeting with folks from VFW to talk in greater detail. They were represented on the advisory group as well, but we met with their actual, I forget his
Hi, Mucky Muck.
Is it commander? Anyway, president, commander, whatever it is. We met with the leadership there, and they really wanted the idea of the side path next to the driveway, expanding the driveway came from them, and that was the best option that they, wanted to see.
Does the order of magnitude cost, is that for the permanent recommendation or the temporary? the interim recommendation?
Permanent. Yeah, we didn't, we have, the more detailed cost estimate kind of breaks it down a little bit better, but those were all the permanent.
How much of the temporary costs would be kind of written off, or they're just temporary and?
You know, the only part, well, it kind of depends on what happens in the area along 99, right? Because if we do some interim improvements along 99 and then the permanent trail goes behind, then those, you know, you're investing twice. Although I would argue that that's needed along any pedestrian improvements along 99 would be great, no matter what, right? I think the investments along from the promenade and to High Street, they're quite minimal, which was why this was chosen as an interim route, because I think all that's needed there is a little tiny connection from the promenade through the grass to Second, and then the sharrows essentially along High Street. And I think in John and Martin's plan for this year, I believe, is that repaving of High Street, and so along with that can add sharrows.
Portions of, not all.
Portions of, I think that portion of High Street, it might be in the repaving plan for 2018, and so can easily slap down some sharrows after that's done, and the investment there is quite minimal.
Well, one thing I don't understand, why not extend the promenade and tie it into Tumwater if you're already closing that and taking a trail along the Tumwater?
Yeah, well, that is the permanent alignment, but it's that VFW driveway that gets tricky. So right now it's about a 12-foot wide driveway, really poor visibility, and so the group felt that High Street was a better, safer option in the interim until we could actually get funding to widen the VFW driveway.
Kelly, having walked that during use by automobiles, I will tell you it is right scary to go down that VFW driveway and not know what's coming around that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can appreciate wanting to use High Street until we can get something safer. Even when there's an event at the VFW, I've noticed that they have flaggers for the cars so that they're not having cornfield meets in the middle of the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Is there plans for trailhead parking? We hear from the people in Kadima that are up by the new park, now that Metro has added land and trails and advertised that, but there's little or no parking there. So this will just compound that. If you talked about trailhead parking.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Having this route then allows people, you don't have to necessarily drive into Kadima, you can walk through it safely. So that, I think, maybe doesn't add to the parking demand here, because we could see folks walking. And then also, Metro participated in the advisory group, and they told us that they do have, in the next several years, in their plan is to work with the city, work with the community on a access plan for all of Kadima Bluff, which would, and that plan would look at trailhead options to really take the demand off of the trailhead there. And so they have land down along south on 99, outside of the city limits, but
Yeah, we've walked, some of us have walked it, so.
yeah, so there was an old hotel site that's totally gone, but anyway, they own that right along 99. It's probably a perfect place for a parking lot and trailhead, and so their plan would be to create that main trailhead so that this one would become more of just the secondary.
That'd be like a mid-trailhead on the south end of all these trails
Right.
going, yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So they bought Lewis Motel.
Maybe, I'm not sure what
Yeah, that was Lewis Motel.
No relation.
And then also the VFW parking lot, really, I mean, of course, when the VFW has events, it's full and it's used, but it's the city's parking lot, and it's really meant for the public to use to access the promenade. And so that is a place where people can park as well.
My concern here is that, you know, you got no sidewalks in Kanema, you got this park over there, people are driving there, now you got introducing more pedestrians, you got people living there. I think that could turn into a messy situation and generate complaints from people. You know, living there, driving, and then dealing with pedestrians and more cars also moving along there.
Yeah, I think, you know, that we did hear a little bit of that, but mostly it's the people in the neighborhood that walk already and that would maybe walk if it were safer, really feel that there's a big benefit to making it safer to walk on their streets. Traffic counts are really low in Kanema, and it qualifies for the 20 miles per hour zone because of the low traffic counts. And I think, you know, cut through traffic is a concern a little bit, but if it's not as quick to drive through there because you have more traffic calming, then maybe fewer people would use it as a cut through. Adding the narrowing and even like the on-street parking actually slows people down quite a bit. In a way, it calms traffic already. To have the shared space, it makes everybody kind of slow down and pay more attention because there's a lot to dodge and a lot to deal with, and so that's almost an advantage and a reason why the group thought it made sense to do it this way.
I used that route as a cut through a time or two, and I will tell you, it's quicker to use South Second, the regular road, than it is to use that.
Yeah.
Also, to address your point about more people, if I recall correctly, some of the studies that I've read in the past, having multi-use paths and trails actually increases property values to adjacent properties in those neighborhoods. Because people want that better quality of life, they want walkability, they want those.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the 4th Avenue, you're talking having a street and pedestrians using the same facility plus the calming devices. It's already
used in that purpose.
Hey, Bob, can I chime in here a little bit?
Sure, go
just
ahead.
so we can get to a finish line on this one. The couple things, there's 3 things that I think of, and if we go back to the map, I think it's important. I appreciated the comment about maintenance because maintenance is always an issue. The difference, though, in this one is we've got to get to this model where we're moving people in alternate modes, right? So this is one element of the entire loop trail that eventually would go up and interface with South End Road, right? So probably somewhere further out in that whole loop alignment through the metro property. So keep this idea in mind about how to get people from maybe our downtown areas or our workplaces through a neighborhood on up even further, and especially if that's a shared use path where you can have bicycles and pedestrians. So these alignments, whatever the alignment turns out to be, that's the end goal, is to be able to move pedestrians from, say, Kanema to downtown, and hopefully not just on nice weather days, right? When they're out for a stroll, preferably maybe some of those people will work downtown and will have that opportunity to walk. But do so on something that's maintained or is lower level of maintenance, and that's always a challenge. Let's face it, the trails we have around there aren't cheap to maintain, as we know from the promenade and the wall cap project that we just finished, and just accessibility, bedrock, all those kind of things. Martin just reminded me there's a wooden bridge that's along McLaughlin Boulevard. Those aren't going to be cheap things to maintain, but I think the advantage is trying to get folks out of their cars to use those. The other thing I was going to say about Kanema, so unlike Kanema is different than pretty much any neighborhood we have in town, and if you spend any time in that area, there's slopes above and below the roadways there. So some of the driveways on 4th in particular, trying to build a standard street section would never be possible because there's just not the width. So a lot of the driveways just drop right off the edge of the road there. And because of that, and because of the kind of the nature of all this vegetation that, you know, we're constantly, at least in the public right of way, trying to keep that trimmed back. I think the neighbors do a good job with that, but it's one of those streets that, while the neighbors would suggest there's a fair amount of speeding, it's hard to speed in that neighborhood, right? So pedestrians and vehicles actually work pretty well together in those neighborhoods because they're visible, unless it's at night, because it's not well lit at night, but during the daytime, it's pretty, you're pretty visible as a pedestrian, and the vehicle speed should be really slow in those neighborhoods. So this whole idea of the shared use street markings that kind of inform the driver that, yeah, you're in a different zone here, and we're still kind of working out what those 20-mile-per-hour neighborhoods or streets might look like. I think Kenema is a good example of a place where we don't have any. If we want pedestrians to use those neighborhoods, we're not going to be able to build a curb, planter strip, sidewalk, parking. You know, it's just that it won't work. And so that's my 2 cents.
One of the things that during the advisory committee's discussion was that this trail, the Kenema McLaughlin Trail, is not a beginning point and an end point. It's part of something bigger. So I'm going to go walk that Kenema McLaughlin Trail today and go park at the head here. No, that's not the intent of the trail at all. It's part of something else that connects, moves people along. People come into it, go out of it in many different places.
Cal,
Go ahead, Mike. The interim alignment, where you move off the promenade on Second and then down High, is that because of the VFW driveway issue?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because I just, as a practical matter, I think we're kind of kidding ourselves that people are going to do that. I think they're still going to stay on the promenade, use the driveway, and because you're not going to get people to veer off and go away from where they want to go.
That might be true. People will walk where they're going to walk, but I think especially for maybe folks that aren't as familiar, maybe you have tourists in the summer downtown or newcomers. If you sign it, then maybe those folks will follow it. But we're not going to be able to control the people who want to walk down the VFW driveway. I mean, they'd probably do it today, right?
One more comment, and I'm going to have to.
I was going to say I'd like to hear the citizen comment.
Thanks.
Because I think there may be something to add to the discussion once we hear that.
Okay, Kelly, would you stay there in case you have answers to some of her issues?
Absolutely.
Okay, Danielle Leckband.
Thanks for saying it correctly. I appreciate that. I am Danielle Leckband, and I am a homeowner on Tumwater Drive. The house that we live in has been in our family for 70 years. It is a home that at 320 Tumwater Drive at the end of Tumwater Street. It's a 3-story building. And the trail, one of the proposed permanent alignments goes right through the side of my house, right through my deck, right next to my laundry window so I can wave at everybody, and right by my basement door. And obviously you can tell I'm not thrilled with that choice. My husband and I were not here in December because we were out of town for the holidays to be at that planning committee meeting, the advisory committee meeting, where they had a vote of what alignments should be on the final paperwork that goes on to the next level. And I can tell you we would not have voted for that route that goes right through my yard and right on top of my house. Basically, I wrote a letter to my friend Kelly here, and I expressed to her my concern about the trail that goes, I know it doesn't go behind the PGE substation, but it goes behind Bud's Towing. It goes behind Mick, who owns the Stillhouse's property, and then it goes right behind my backyard and right over this 12-foot drop that's basalt columnar basalt, and then right next to my laundry window and home for everyone to see my life and my family, my children, everything. And recently I've noticed an uptick in homeless people in the area, especially along 99. And I'm curious about safety. If we were to put a trail behind my home and behind these properties, what is going to stop the homeless people from setting up tents, using needles, doing meth, and also breaking into my home and tagging the area where I live along the rock wall there? I have children. I'm a teacher. I'm concerned about my children's safety, and I'm also concerned about our citizens' safety. A mom and her children in a stroller walking through that area, probably not. I wouldn't want to with my children. And then having bikes going down through my yard, very awkward. Again, our home's been there since 1914. It's a long time. And my other concern is with the 2 bars that are in close proximity to Tumwater there, and that little side alley is called Grand Avenue. People come screaming around that corner where the gray building is and the Falls View, intoxicated all hours of the day and night. My car was just recently hit by one of the patrons at the bar. They backed into my vehicle. If you have our cars that are parked at the end of the street there, well, there's supposed to be a bike path coming out. Where am I going to park my cars? I have 2 teenagers that need to park cars. I need to park my car in front of my home. I can't park down at the VFW and then walk to my house at the end of Tumwater Drive. Again, this just doesn't make sense. I'm scared of my children's safety, my home safety, as well as the community's safety. That's all I have to say. I appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate the ideas, because I would definitely use the trail system, and so would my kids, but maybe in a different fashion.
Kelly, I thought I knew where you live, but now I'm confused. Can you point it out on the plan?
Is that one right?
I'm right there, yeah.
So there is unimproved right-of-way, a narrow strip of unimproved right-of-way that goes in between these 2 homes. And so that's where that dotted line is shown, just because it is right-of-way. But it's true that
it's my yard,
right,
and
it functionally performs, the right-of-way functionally performs, I think, as your side yard. Right?
It is my side yard and it's my deck, and we're working with the city right now. We're building a deck this summer to improve. A building was already there, and we took it down because it was unsightly. We're putting in a deck that's something that we can use, and it beautifies our home. And so we're working with the city to get a vacation or something like that of that piece. We're already in the process of filling out the paperwork and working with the city to get that piece of property, as part of our land, since we've been there forever. So yeah, I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
Is that right away where the 12-foot vertical is?
Yeah, it's basalt, and it just goes down like this. And then my backyard goes straight up again. It's a crazy backyard with tons of vegetation. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense or safety or for dollar-wise.
Any questions? I would discourage the city from going through that process or that route, really, since the property has been there for so many years. It's already been used for personal uses. And what do they call that system where you've used something for 7 years or something?
Grandfathered in.
No, well, there's some other name for it, but anyway, I would discourage disrupting anybody's property. And it's for practical use.
I think the other little piece is these dots. For instance, those dots are shown as the full width of the right-of-way, right? I don't think that's the intended width of the pathway.
It's still going through my property. Actually, it doesn't make sense.
Actually, from what I'm seeing on the map here, that's right-of-way, public right-of-way. Now, it does feel very much like your yard.
We are working on getting, with the city though, is getting that piece of land to belong part to us and part to our neighbors.
And we could talk more about that, I think, in another forum, but right now it's public right-of-way. And I would just say this, those dots, if we go back to the dots, So there's a high level of potential that area, kind of encompassing Bud's Towing, the bar, everything up to the Rock Bluff. Yeah, that whole area there will likely someday redevelop, right? Even where the house is at the very end. I suspect that house has a better use in the future. And when they do that, Tumwater will maybe become a longer cul-de-sac or become something a little different. I don't know that it'll ever go back. I doubt ODOT will give us an opportunity to connect into McLaughlin, but definitely help with the flow of those properties back there. So think of this as a long-range plan. I definitely know we need to use Tumwater, whether we need to use that area adjacent to your house that's public right-of-way. I bet you put it there because you saw it was public right-of-way, right? And so typically we'd rather do that, especially given the feedback that we got from the other neighbors, right, that said, we don't want you to split our properties like that. So,
I feel the same way.
So I think at the end of the day, you shouldn't lose sleep over this, because from a trail perspective, it really does kind of feel weird to have to make that turn anyway. It'd be nice to put it, but you know, when that area redevelops and Tumwater extends, keep it right along Tumwater, and it'll move through that way versus using that little niche of a public right-of-way. That's kind of weird. I'm not quite sure I understand how that got platted that way, but so I wouldn't panic about that. I just think we've got to show these conceptual drawings that show, you know, the trail going through.
And really, this would be implemented, the permanent trail would be implemented when those properties would redevelop. So that could be 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, we have no idea. That's why this one's kind of conceptual and aspirational, because we will have this interim trail, and then, hey, if redevelopment occurs, then maybe we can get a nicer permanent trail. And I think what John said about, you know, Tumwater extending, you know, if those properties do redevelop, we would still be working with those developers to talk about how to best integrate the trail, and going way back behind wouldn't necessarily be the best way. And I think what this conveys is that there are multiple options to get through that area, and that we don't know exactly what it is yet. The reason that, you know, it was shown as just one line connecting, kind of like the existing TSP is, and that just made folks uncomfortable because they thought that is the option and it will cut through my property. With this showing multiple options, with this revised plan, I think we're trying to convey that, you know, we don't really know exactly where it will go. We want to be flexible. We want to consider all of the alternatives and the impacts that could happen. And so while you know, I hear the comments and I don't disagree at all. I think John has a good point saying, you know, things are a little more flexible than they look, and we shouldn't lose too much sleep over it. I'm trying to figure out what, if anything can be changed, or...
I have lost a little sleep just because it's my home. You know, anybody would feel that way if their home was being considered for that, and just the safety piece.
Kelly, could you bring back to option B, I think is the one that you're wanting us to approve or support?
Well, so it's, the recommendation from the advisory group is the interim trail.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the permanent trail.
With those different options.
With these different options, because the
no specific
yes,
plan there.
All of the included options, because it's so far into the future and so uncertain that we can't possibly, you know, put all of our, like, we couldn't get behind just one of those options.
So would someone like to make a motion on this?
Bob, I move that we recommend to the Planning Commission to approve the interim trail plan with its permanent trail alignment options.
We have a second?
Second.
You know, is this option B, right? Do we need to identify that in the motion?
I don't think so.
Go back to the recommended.
It's the interim trail, not the option B.
Yeah, it's
Okay, we're just doing the interim now?
No, the interim trail, which mostly follows option B, and then the permanent trail with its varied options.
Right, that's part of where B is, right?
It's mostly B,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
If you wanted to, you could just refer to the advisory group's recommendations for the interim and permanent trails.
Okay.
And one comment, I think I'd like to add a second motion that at some point staff do a maintenance estimate here. Just, I don't know how easily that can be done, but so there's some estimate of what it's going to cost to maintain it. I mean, we should be thinking about that for our trails and our parks. I mean, if you go into our city goals and you get down where the park are listed, there's lots of parks and lots of trails that need work. And now we're just adding more. We're, as I view it, we're behind the curve on that. And I'm in favor of these ideas, but let's talk about how we're going to maintain them. So that'd be a separate second motion. That's my
I'll
suggestion.
second yours if you'll second mine.
I'll second yours.
Any further discussion? All approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Now I'd like to make a follow-up motion that staff prepare an estimate of what it's going to cost for the recommended proposal, both the temporary and the permanent. And I realize there might be some difficult estimating in there, but we should have some kind of number or range so we start getting a feel for what these things cost.
And I would strongly second that, because the problem in the parks is that we've never put enough money in the budget to maintain them. That's where we are now, so.
I rather suspect nobody has an idea how much it costs to maintain them.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta start with something.
Yes.
So that's a move for the planning commission to have the,
Well, it'd be
Staff.
park or public works, whoever's responsible for maintaining the trail once it's built.
We can inform that.
Public
Actually, it's going to be
Works, that'd
both.
be parks.
Well, I'd say, they can decide that. They can, whoever's going to be responsible for maintenance.
Somebody in the city needs to be responsible.
Right.
And a budget needs to be brought forward to the planning commission.
Yeah, it's a preliminary estimate, so we know
Yeah.
what's going on.
Okay.
I would put the motion down that John is trying to describe as being to present a preliminary maintenance budget from parks and from public works for the various sections that they would control under these both the intermediate and the permanent.
You know, I think there's, between the architect that has got the design work or some of our own history with park maintenance, we can come up with a number.
Yeah.
Frequency and number and, you know.
I like Henry's wording better than mine, so if you want to pick that up, that's good.
Would you second his?
Well, sure.
Okay. All in approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, passed. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The next item is 5C, the Central Point Road Corridor Speed Analysis. By John Lewis.
Yeah, hold on, let me, Parks and PW. So I don't have a PowerPoint, but the memo that Dana Webb put together, so Dana presented on this topic shortly last meeting, and we wanted to go through it again just to give you a heads up of what's coming. So I'm just going to talk through the written memorandum that's dated January 16th and in your packet, rather than try to go through a, what do you got? You've got, oh, there you go. You've got it up there. So if you remember, we were asked, somebody came to our meeting and asked us to do a speed study along Central Point Road between the city limits, and I don't know that they were as concerned, but we took it all the way to Warner Parrott, so that full stretch of Central Point Road. And it's been a while since we've done a speed request to the state, speed study request to the state. So in talking through that, we all kind of agreed that, let's try and build a better model. We've gotten some recent press about speed studies and what was done right or what was done wrong, how we got public comment. Lynn Avenue's been kind of bearing down on us for a couple of years now. And so we talked about this and said, let's build a better model so that we're giving the state as much information as we have. Whether we'll go to this effort on every single speed study that comes through, I can't guarantee that. But Dana's done a really outstanding job of pulling all this together. So basically, we're preparing, and we want your recommendation before we move forward with a request of the state. The state's process, it's a one-page form. We could ship it off to them, and they ask us to respond to, whether the police think it's a good idea, whether the neighborhood thinks it's, or the community thinks it's a good idea, and whether Public Works thinks it's a good idea. And so we're just trying to inform that with some information here. Henry, you're about to jump out of your seat. What do you got?
Well, I was reading the second paragraph here about the existing speed stones. And when I was up there lately, I noticed that there's one that's missing in the paragraph.
Okay.
There's a 30-mile-an-hour zone from Warner Parrott up past the trailer park.
Okay. Okay. So this, so what Dana's provided is some of the things that the state looks at when they consider that, and we're trying to, she was trying to take a proactive approach at looking at that because as we've reported before and how, as she's shown here in the graphs on, or the graphical representation on the 85th percentile speeds, there's a section, so if you could scroll down for me a little bit there, Lisa, keep going, it's on page 3. So this is some of the data that we pulled from our traffic counts from the past. So the dark blue line represents the posted speed limit, and along the bottom axis is really just different intersections along Central Point Road. So it starts pretty much at the city limits. So that top graph, we're starting at the city limits, moving towards Warner Parrott. And the bottom graph goes the opposite direction. So what that's saying is there's basically 45-mile-an-hour speed at the city limits as you come into the city, and then it drops to 35 just southwest of Partlow Road, and then it stays 35. And if you're correct, Henry, then she only went to Shenandoah Drive. So anyway, that's the posted speed, and then the dotted lines represent data that's been collected over the years at each of the traffic counter and speed indicator recordings that we've had throughout the various years. So she's got 2011, 2014, 2017 data showing in each of these graphs. The one below, it's just in a different direction. So top graph is northbound, bottom graph is southbound. And what it shows is we've got folks obeying the speed limit or under the speed limit for that first segment as you come into town. But as you proceed closer to town, a lot of folks are exceeding that speed limit. And so, again, as you know, that 85th percentile is kind of something that the state tends to set speeds on. They look at all those other considerations that were listed on the prior page, but they also look pretty heavily at that 85th percentile. So the concern that Dana concluded, that she came up with right off the bat was, well, if we ask, we might, expecting that we're going to see that speed limit go down, we may find that the state recommends that it go up. And that's a similar, maybe quite different, but similar problem to what we see on Lynn Avenue, right? Neighbors in particular wanted slower speeds, and yet, based on the 85th percentile, the speed limit was set higher.
Why would that go up? I mean, and the safety concerns, I mean, you're in neighborhood, the speed limit should be maintained at certain speed limit because of the, safety concerns or issues.
Well, we'll talk through that a little bit because there aren't necessarily there's not a lot of accident history there. So if you're using accidents as your measure of safety, we don't have a lot of problems along there, but she's talked about that as well. and scroll down for me a little bit more to the next graph. The other thing that I thought was interesting was at the city limit line, you can see the traffic counts are down near 1,500 vehicles per day. As you might guess, all the neighborhood infill traffic uses that corridor, so the traffic counts go up quite a bit as you get closer to Central Point, or to Warner Parrott. So that somewhat informs me that a lot of the speeding traffic that's using Central Point, that's above that's going above the 35-mile-an-hour zone, is also generated from within those local neighborhoods. Okay, now that's not everybody. A lot of people come off of South End, maybe from the county, and use in Partlow and come across. But it's kind of interesting how most of the data that we have with regard to the volumes indicates that that's coming out of the neighborhoods that are off of Central Point Road.
If I read this right, that 2/3 of the volume at down toward Mount Pleasant is really city residents.
Right. Yep. So that's where your speeders
Maybe a
are.
little deceiving, okay, where you get Partlow, Eric just jumps at Partlow, okay? That's those coming from South End Road. Okay, at South End Road, there's a tremendous amount of traffic that goes, or at Partlow, there's a tremendous amount of traffic that goes on to Central Point Road.
There is that caveat that we can't really capture, but you're right? A lot of feeder traffic comes down Partlow. So she's acknowledged that, it's really pretty much just a 2-lane roadway. The lane widths aren't that much different. There are some sections that have shoulders and other sections that don't. Some sections have bike lanes and even parking strips. But for the most part, it's really just kind of the old county road section that it's always been. It's got some potholes in it, as we've heard, but it's generally a good collector street. I want to say this was collector. Was it arterial? Minor arterial. Okay. So again, she talks about the safety. We got a year's worth of data. We want to get some more to share with ODOT. But during that year, there was 2 rear end accidents and 2 basically side swipe vehicles turning and having accidents that way. So angle crashes. The other little element that we're informing we intend to share with state is some of the neighborhood feedback. So we've never done this before that I recall, which is to actually reach out to the neighborhood in a web form and ask them for their opinion about what speeds they think it should be posted as. And we actually collected, they didn't have to put it there. Well, yeah, I think they did. They were required to put address there so that there's actually a map in here that kind of indicates where most of those folks were from. So you see folks that live way out in the county. There was just a couple of them that surveyed, but I noticed that they suggested it should all be 45 miles an hour, probably because they want to get to their destination quicker, right? So I don't know if that's true for everybody out in the county, but if I'm the guy that's trying to commute from out of town, through town to my destination, I might want to go a little faster too. That's probably not the sentiment of those folks that live along that street, right? So anyway, we got some good feedback there. It's presented in the, yes?
I had also posted the email that Dana sent on the Nextdoor website. So
you did it twice?
No, it went out about.
Yeah, it's been circulated pretty heavily, yeah. So I appreciate you doing that. I think we had library and police department, a lot of folks posted that, and we noticed that was a good way of getting feedback. People seem to react to that a little bit more than, newspaper articles or any just straight up website posting.
Concerned people are on there.
Yeah. So can you scroll up a little bit to the?
Well, I was impressed at Exhibit 2, where it shows the speed settings from 2011, 2014, and 2017. And the 85th percentile in each section of the road was very, very close in all 3 of those years. It was just
consistent.
Like the Northeast Shenandoah Drive in 2011, the speed was 41, and 2014, the speed was 40, and 2017, the speed was 40. You know, it goes right through that whole.
Have you considered taking this and going back to the concerned citizens who wanted the traffic study done and say, this is what we have and would submit to the state, and the likely decision that they'll come to is 85th percentile? Do you still support this request to study?
We haven't taken it back to them. We are bringing it to you folks. We think you're the, you know, I think if you're the one who's making the complaint, we're going to have a hard time convincing you otherwise. I can tell you the couple of folks that I talked to that I know in the community that live along that boulevard felt adamant that despite the data, it should be lower.
I don't know. I wouldn't take this to the state personally. I mean,
So we're just providing this information. For us, it seems like our recommendation is to lower the speed to 35 for the entire corridor. So that 45-mile-an-hour section as you come into town, for consistency, to me that makes sense, and that's what we're recommending. That's what we're going to tell the state we would like to see there, and you know, assuming we have your blessing, we'll move forward with that. If you want something different, you can let us know.
Do we have speed recommendations on our descriptions of minor and major arterials?
I don't think so. I don't recall that. You recall anything like that? Specific speeds?
Not specific speeds, speed ranges.
Speed ranges?
Yeah.
Now, should that be included in the letter and saying that under our planning guidelines, we suggest that these are appropriate?
If we have them, you're gonna have to.
so John, question. So let's say you would like to, for consistency's sake.
And so in the letter, we actually reference it in paragraph 3, posted speeds on minor arterial roadways typically range between 25 and 45 miles an hour. If I know Dana, she pulled this from the TSP. So she doesn't reference it here, but, oh no, actually she does. The Oregon City Transportation System Plan states, so yeah.
John,
Yes.
John, obviously the geometry of the roadway gives motorists the impression that it's safe to exceed the speed limit and they're feeling comfortable driving over the posted speed limit. Is there the possibility, if we want to keep it lower speeds, to put some traffic calming geometry into the roadway? Is that would be a consideration? Is that something we want to look at, or are we comfortable with the status quo? What do you feel as the city engineer?
Well, I guess to me, that roadway is not that wide anyway. So I mean, we wouldn't. I'm assuming you're not talking things like speed bumps.
No, not talking about speed bumps.
So the other things would be signage, better signage maybe, or narrow lanes.
I was
for
thinking
instance,
narrow lanes, possibly.
kind of road diet. It seems fairly narrow already, but that could be an opportunity is to narrow the lanes through there.
Well, according to this study that we've made so far this year, if ODOT follows their normal recommendations, the speed would be increased remain, what is it now? 30?
35.
35.
It would be increased to 40. If they followed their 85 percentile rule.
Has the police given their input yet?
They have. They provided accidents.
Do they make a speed recommendation?
I don't see it here. My recollect is no, I don't recall.
But do you guys, so if if you ask the state for 35-mile posted speed limit through the whole stretch, state comes back with
40.
40. Will they listen to you and still maintain 35, or how does that work? I mean, are they going to say, okay, this speed limit technically can be 45, but we'll support 35 for the corridor?
It's my understanding that they're going to work with us on that end as well to make sure that as long as we're not too far off. If we're talking 5 miles an hour on this kind of a street that's already posted 35, I think while they could move it to 40, I doubt it, especially if we're asking them not to, the police are asking them not to, and the neighborhood's asking them not to.
Another question is, what would be the chances of going in with Clackamas County and having the county recommend a lowering of the speed limit coming up the hill into Oregon City? From their 45 to 40, say, based on geometry?
Well, the county has been doing some road safety evaluations. They did one for Redland Road, and I noticed a lot of new signage out there on Redland Road. And there's another one as well that I've noticed that they've done that too. I'm not sure that necessarily helps this scenario.
I'm thinking it might help a little bit in the sense that a good share of the traffic that seems to be maintaining its speed is coming up the hill and coming around, and you've got a rather quick change from extremely rural to extremely urban right at the corner of where you come into town. And having the county say that, that's a problem for them too, may perhaps make it easier.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I wish I did.
Are they looking for a recommendation, approval?
Yes, my opinion is that we should go ahead and send a letter to ODOT with our strength in the whole list of reasons here, not necessarily the traffic study, but the whole list of reasons for lowering the speed limit seems to be pretty strong to me. I'll take a motion to approve this draft letter, if you've seen it.
I guess my worry is if the geometry of the roadway is making motors feel comfortable exceeding the posted speed limit, lowering and posting it is not going to do anything if they're feeling comfortable as a motorist speeding down this roadway. I think something needs to change if they're already speeding.
There's one other thing, Jonathan, that I don't know that I made clear this time, but the only place, so it's posted 35 for most of the roadway. It's 45 as you come into the city to Parlow. So if you're familiar with that, it's not the full, most of it's posted at 35, and we're just seeing exceedances there. And we could have some enforcement review of that. I think police were surprised to see that change.
It's a great place to generate revenue.
Right. So
doing a lot of that on
it's more, I think, the original question came because we saw so much land development between the city limits and Partlow, and so many new vehicles that are turning out onto Central Point, and there was just this acknowledgement that difference occurred for that one segment of Central Point Road. And I don't know what that's probably 2,500, 3,000 feet between those two. So really we're asking them to reduce the speed limit in that one section from 45 to 35.
So just over half a
And
mile.
if they were to come to the conclusion because of the data that, well, no, we won't do that. And by the way, we're going to raise everything to 45. Or we're going to raise everything to 40. It's my experience, they're going to reach out to us and go, do you really want us to do anything here or just leave it as is.
So you don't think there's a lot of risk in them forcing us into 40 miles an hour on the other
I
stretch?
don't think so, but it is some, we haven't done a lot of these, and it's interesting how, we're seeing so much speeding in that 35 versus in the 45. So we can even ask them before we send them a letter to see if they're, let them know what we're talking about. We haven't reached out to ODOT yet.
I think the second question is you need to reveal or prepare the neighborhood for this information so they know that there's a slim chance of getting what they want and a higher chance that something could go south on them, just so they don't get surprised. I mean, tell them we're going to send it, but this is the news. Otherwise, they find out that, somebody's out there changing the sign, but it's going the wrong way. So I don't know, go to the original people who brought it up or neighborhood association and let them know what's going on.
Your comment that you could reach out to ODOT to get a feel, I think that's an excellent process, that you should do that before you make a decision on a recommendation. You could talk to whoever's in charge, this sort of thing, and it'd be a pretty quick story for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about the neighbor piece.
Scaredy cat.
Well, I mean, it says it's been in the paper, it's been, so, it's like we're giving an update before we know the answer. I don't know.
Doesn't the former mayor live out there somewhere?
He lives off of Parrish.
Okay. Well, I think he mentioned this at one time.
Is he are you insinuating he's one of the speeders?
No, that he wanted the speed limit lowered. I remember that.
But really, giving these results out to the neighborhood may in fact point out that better awareness of the fact that it's we ourselves who are speeding, as it were, is, like the first step, I should think, in the 12-step road to recovery.
So what I'd like to get is a motion to move forward with caution, but the general approach and, a letter to ODOT as written is something you support.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I will make a motion that, based upon our discussion, that we would actually support contacting ODOT regarding this matter, and then following that up with submittal of the letter as written, assuming, of course, that ODOT is willing to take it on under that basis.
Can I amend your motion, say I move that we support the request that John is going to send to the state.
In the report under next steps, maybe can you scroll to that for me real quick? It's on page 6. No, 8.
Keep it simple.
Under next steps, that staff request. So it's I guess it's the third sentence. Staff requests that TAC provide a formal recommendation on the requested speed limit for the Central Point corridor on behalf of local residents. So that's what we want. We'll make the call to ODOT, and if it looks like they're gonna really turn us upside down, we'll bring it back to you before we send it. So
Works for me.
You can make that motion, that'd be great.
Okay. I'll allow my motion to be amended as per the requests on the floor to make it a simple support
For the 35 mile an hour.
for 35 mile an hour on the existing 45 mile an hour section.
I think that's good enough.
Did we get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's done.
Thank you.
Item 5D, TAC 2018 goals.
So basically, we need to get together to talk about the goals. In the past, we've done it with a small subcommittee, and I don't know if you want to do that again, but I don't think here talking through goals, other than if anybody has specific interests, it'd be, you know, that's fine. I find usually we're I just want to be careful about taking too big a bite at the apple when it comes to goals. And some of the things that we can deliver, I don't want to have to try to defend here in an open public meeting. I'd rather sit down with the chair, definitely, and probably the vice chair or another member, and figure that out as we've done in the past.
That's worked well in the past.
It has.
But I would encourage you, those of you that aren't going to participate in that, to communicate with whoever that is, Bob, and make sure if there's particular things you want to see us pursue, let us know. We can talk through that.
So could you please refresh our memory here? The last page, it has 2017 TAC goals, and then you mark which citywide or city commission goal they match with. The language in there, is that something we did last year for this year? And
We took a different approach last year. You guys wanted a matrix of
Yeah.
your goals for 2017 and how they corresponded to the city's goals. And so we decided to do those check boxes on which goals your goals
Right.
met.
no, I think that's useful. And the language then was last year, so we would be working as updating this particular page to fit what we think is going on in 2018.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, then we'll go to 5E, Public Works Report.
Just real quick, we had committed to coming back to you today with more information on the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit guidelines. And while we talked about that and kind of internally discussed some ideas on how we might move that program forward, we're really not ready to present. So just asking you to push that off till next February. I don't think, yeah. I think February is what we wanted to do.
Yes.
Yeah, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So other than that, just know that we're looking at options there for implementation of that we can handle on our own, and try to not make it too cumbersome for the community either. And then you've got a couple items, Martin.
Yeah. So last month we'd received an update on the manual uniform traffic control devices, the MUTCD, which is kind of like the transportation Bible that we all try and comply with. It's published by the Federal Highway Administration that states this is what local agencies can do in terms of their traffic control standards to comply with the federal regulations. They issued a circular stating that the temporary authorization that they had issued in 2011 for rectangular reflective pedestrian activated beacons. So what we have over there at 7th by the library, and then also at 12th and Washington Street, that the temporary authorization has been rescinded and that they are no longer permitted on FHWA roadways, and they've been struck from the MUTC catalog. Okay? The rationale behind it was they had temporary authorization. Someone in the private sector went out in the interim and obtained a patent and was given a patent for the flashing beacons, and everything within the MUTC catalog cannot be a patented product. It has to be just open source, public access devices are the only thing that's authorized within the catalog. So anything that's up and it's in place can remain in place. If there's minor maintenance that has to happen to it to keep it operational, it can remain operational. Something happens to it, it gets hit by a car or it needs to be relocated, it can't go back up. This wouldn't seem like such a big deal, but 12th and Washington is scheduled for resignalization in the near term, and we had hoped to reposition the pedestrian beacon that was located there to an alternate location, and we will not be able to do that. Okay? They have given us some guidance on if something goes down and you want to use an alternative to a pedestrian activated beacon, here are some alternatives. We've been looking at some of them and potentially implementing them at different locations, but there won't be any more similar to what you've seen at those 2 locations within the city. And that's it on that.
Hey, quick question. You had this handout with the various pedestrian warnings, and is the very first one you're talking about?
Yep.
And now, is there any alternate
Yeah, there's some alternatives.
Okay.
I didn't give it to Lisa to share up there, but there's a 4-page circular with some alternatives. The one that we're probably going to be looking at is a retrofit that takes the standard 36 by 36 or 48 by 48 pedestrian crosswalk diamond, and it has flashing. Oh, thank you, Lisa. God, you're good. Remind me to give you a good evaluation at the end. Basically, implementing it to a retrofit to those. Okay, that's non-patented. It's just open source product. Any manufacturer can install LEDs on there, and then we would basically repurpose the PED button, the actuator, to turn those on as a pedestrian's coming through there. But what you see as of today, if one of those goes down, it won't be replaced in kind.
Just out of my morbid curiosity, why does it behoove somebody to patent this if jurisdictions can't use it because it's in the MUTCD?
Good question.
I don't
Say goodbye
know.
from that.
Somebody thought they had a better mousetrap and their intellectual property needed some sort of protections, and they went and got a patent. And
now they can't make any sales.
They can't make any sales for a community that's going to try and comply with the MUTCD.
On the other hand, if you have a mind like mine, maybe perhaps they wanted not to have it on anywhere in the country, and so they patented it knowing that they couldn't be used.
So we were advised by the county. They maintain all of our signals, and they keep us abreast of any of these signalization flyers that come up. We get about 2 or 3 of these a year. The county's going the same direction we are. So if once it gets delisted, we're going to try and figure a workaround.
You have, one of these is similar to or exactly the same as the pictures I sent a while back over to you from what I saw in Colorado when I was there a couple of years ago. I think it's the next one down where they've got the signs in the middle of the intersection.
Well, the things that get run over?
Yeah, well, the things you get hit. I saw that one in Swiss someplace.
That was, scroll back up. Isn't that one right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this one up here at the top.
Those are be used in medians or turning lane.
You know, where I saw them was on center line in the crosswalk.
Well, I used to have a father-in-law that worked for ODOT, and he would travel the freeways, and they had a standing understanding, or whatever you want to call it, that anything within 20 feet of the pavement on the freeway would be hit within 10 years.
That's close.
So,
I don't doubt that.
believe it.
So that's the update on that. And then the next update I have for you is this upcoming summer's pavement contract. The major roads that we're going to be hitting in no specific order. Well, actually, I'll start from bottom left and moving up. So Partlow from Central Point to about 250 feet southeast of South End Road. That's called for reconstruction. There's Roundtree Drive, which is the two little segments right off of Central Point, and there's a house that's in the middle of the road.
Yeah, you drive through their yard there?
Yeah. So we won't be going onto the private property, but we'll be doing the full length of Roundtree from Central Point up to Warner Parrott. The actual extent of each of the treatments, we won't go into detail at this time. I'm just letting you know what we're working on. Moving up, there's a small section on Polk Street between 7th and 9th that we'll be working on. Working our way up towards the north. We'll be doing some work on 12th from Washington to Center. Working our way down south, we'll be working on 10th Street, right from the railroad tracks back to Main Street. So those of you that use Singer Hill as your primary access, that one, because it's a non-residential area, we will probably contract that as night work to minimize the impact.
What about the 12th Street one?
That will probably be day work. Yep.
I know you weren't going to discuss treatments, but have you entered into a contract for microseals?
No, not yet.
Are we going to be microsealing?
We were going to be doing slurry seal this summer and chip seal.
Okay.
The last discussion I had with Matt is that we weren't sure if we were going to be doing a section of microseal. What road section is he envisioning?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So
I just was wondering if we were piggybacking on other jurisdictions when they bring in the contractor
yeah, so
up here to do
typically for a large section of our slurry seal, we've been piggybacking for the last 5 years now, 4 years. Yeah, on the Hillsborough contract. It gives us a better scale of economy.
Because last year, didn't we do quite a bit of microseal? Or was that?
We did 2 road sections as microseal.
And how are they holding up?
Well, holding up fairly well. We did rubber asphalt chip seal, which we're keeping an eye on, and then we did 2 sections of roadway with micro seal, and we're keeping an eye on all of those. Micro seal, last year was the 2nd instance of micro seal that we had actually implemented, right? Is it the 2nd or the 3rd?
We did on First Street. We did.
Yeah. So we're keeping an eye on those. And then the rubber chip seal was a new initiative that we did last year that we're keeping an eye on, and that was primarily on Clackamas River Drive for the rubber chip seal.
Holmes Lane.
So a quick question, are you doing any major utility construction under any of these projects?
High Street.
High Street, so moving back down towards the south. So High Street, we're going from, I'll say North 2nd Street. There's not really a North 2nd Street, but just to delineate, through South 2nd Street, and then also portions of Tumwater Drive and South 2nd Street up to Center Street. And predicating the pavement work, we have a major water main realignment project on High Street that'll be going in first, and then PMUF will be coming in behind it to do the pavement restoration.
We also need to finish 15th Street, so we're gonna, there's 2 blocks there that we didn't pave because we had pipelines that were pretty poor shape, so we're going to finish those up. And so those will feel like this year's pavement projects, but they're really last year's pavement projects
So,
to be completed.
one final one, do we have any areas that are in moratorium because of old sewers yet, or have you cleaned all that up?
We've got one moratorium area left. It's off of Warner Parrott. For me, it's always been it's been the least priority because there's really not a lot of redevelopment potential.
Okay.
And it's going to be, I think it's going to be our toughest one yet. And when we're done with that, depending on how we build it, we may be rebuilding the whole street.
Senator, you got a question?
So on that, you said you're going to be doing the work on Tumwater.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a big contract?
For Tumwater?
Yeah. I mean, you got utility there and...
That one, I think, is just a mill and pave.
Oh, okay.
That's not massive.
But you were saying like
the
water
biggest
line?
one that's going to be sort of probably a major inconvenience is going to be High Street, because you're going to have 2 consecutive projects running back to back one with utility alignments, not just water, there's potential stormwater work that needs to happen through there. There'll be some private utilities that may also have to relocate, we don't know yet. And then we'll be coming in and doing a major pavement restoration on top of that,
And moving the bus line too.
Yeah.
temporarily. Yeah, so more than likely, what will wind up happening is temporary traffic shift of all of the transportation routes over to Center Street. If I was the contractor putting together a traffic control plan, that's what I'd be requesting. Okay.
Thank you, Martin.
Yep.
Item 6A, the New York Times article, How Would Jesus Drive? That was kind of interesting.
And informational, yeah.
Yeah, it's informational only, but interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't intended to be political or a mixing of church and state at all. It was really just kind of acknowledging that, in fact, you know, when I think about this group and how we could influence it, it'd sure be nice if we had a little more ability to influence nice driving. Make sure our community felt a little bit more like they were.
You know, I have something that I try to do
friendlier.
daily, and that's to do something nice for somebody else. And that works right into my driving. Just yield to somebody.
So the Portland metro area, if you look at page 2, paragraph 5, we're actually referenced in this op-ed. So I thought that'd be of interest. If for no other reason, read it for that section. I won't tell you what it says, so I'll make you read it.
You let the speeders come down Holcomb Boulevard before you turn out in front of them?
I just stay out of their way as much as possible. Does anybody have any future agenda items they'd like to bring up?
I have a question that may or may not be an agenda item, but I've been driving on Fur Avenue a little bit, and I got a question why we have a center line for half of Fur Avenue and we don't for the other half. I think I kind of know the answer, but it seems like it ought to go all the way from Malala Avenue to Beaver Creek Road, or not at all. Not just stop in the middle at the corner there where it makes a turn.
Where the stop sign's at?
Yeah.
I think it's there because of the curve, you know, the curvature of the road, whereas the other one's pretty straight.
I rather suspect it's there because the part from Malala to that corner is an old section of road, and it did not go past that corner until about 10, 15 years ago, and that when we put in the part of First Street going out to Beaver Creek Road, it was striped as part of the installation, but nobody ever went back and striped the old part of Fur.
Again, I think it's because it's got lots of curves to it and keep people in the right lane versus the straight section that goes from Malala all the way to the end. It doesn't really need a stripe.
But people like to drive down the middle of the road on that old part.
Not what, well.
Anyway, it just seems like it's not quite
Stripe doesn't tell me where to drive.
Anybody else? This meeting is adjourned.
good.